Good morning. It is Wednesday, July 15th, 2015. This is a special edition as the world reacts to the historic agreement reached between Iran and world powers in Vienna yesterday. Coming up later today, the details of the nuclear agreement hailed by President Obama as an achievement towards a peaceful Middle East and criticized by naysayers as a historic mistake. Global reactions show a divided opinion both in the Arab world and Europe. And finally, a new Middle East. How will the deal reached reshape the volatile map of the bloodiest region in the world? Good morning, I'm Yael Levi, and we begin, of course, with Iran. The world held its breath yesterday when at 11:30 Vienna time, the delegates of the P5+1 in Iran, starring U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Jawad Zarif, took to the global stage and announced that nearly 3 years of negotiations to reach a deal curbing Iran's nuclear aspirations in return for sanction relief have ended. And thus, the pieces on the global chessboard are not nailed into place anymore. Shortly after the announcement in Austria, U.S. President Barack Obama addressed Americans, but in essence, the world, from the White House, as he recently did with Cuba, proving that the world leaders can move the pieces on the global chessboard if they so decide. This will be the American president's greatest foreign policy legacy, no doubt. And in an extraordinary sign of the times, simultaneous to Obama's address, in a virtual live televised conversation, Iranian President Rouhani addressed his people, and in essence the world, and hailed the agreement as a win-win deal. Now, the newly announced accord between Iran and 6 outside powers deals only with the nation's nuclear program. Its true meaning, though, is far greater. It is a step towards reimagining the Middle East and America's role in it. We're joined from Jerusalem outside the Israeli parliament by I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. In studio with us, Dr. Raz Zimt from the Alliance Center for Iranian Studies. Good morning to you. Also, of course, by Haaretz senior defense analyst Amir Oren. Good morning to you. But before anything, let's take a look at the recap of the historic day that was yesterday when that deal between Iran and the P5+1 was reached. Let's take a look.
Negotiators in Vienna emerging from marathon talks this morning jubilant and victorious, announcing they finally reached a deal to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon.
This moment has been a long time coming, and we have worked very hard to get here.
It was a rocky road, 18 days in Vienna, 2 years of high-stakes diplomacy, 6 years since President Obama first reached out directly to Iran's supreme leader, and 36 years since this. The crisis of 1979, when 52 Americans were held hostage for a terrifying 444 days. The president now hailing a new chapter in Iran's relationship with the West.
This deal offers an opportunity to move in a new direction. We should seize it.
Under the deal, Iran agreed to sharply cut back its nuclear program, and in exchange, the U.S. agreed to end crippling economic sanctions on Iran. Tonight, celebrations in the streets of Tehran, but not everyone is cheering. Israel blasted the agreement.
The world is a much more dangerous place today than it was yesterday.
And in Washington, lawmakers, who now have 60 days to review the deal, are already threatening to derail it.
It looks very much like they made a worse deal than even we had feared.
Let's go live straight to Vienna, where I-24 News correspondent there, Eli Hochenberg, who's been covering the talks over the course of the last 18 days, is standing by. Eli, really quickly, the reactions in Vienna yesterday when that deal was announced, what were they?
Well, first of all, Vienna now is coming back to normal, to not caring about high-stake diplomacy. The journalists have left, the diplomats have left, the delegations have left. So Vienna is back to business. Yesterday was a very exciting day here. Sort of euphoria here in the air. The Iranian journalists were highly excited, and I think that their excitement really affected the entire atmosphere. And of course, the delegation themselves. It was, a very a moment of accomplishment for them after really 22 months of harsh negotiations, especially the last couple of weeks. So it was a very exciting day, but now no one can even tell that something at that scale happened in this gorgeous yet quiet city of Vienna.
Vienna, the capital that saw, the Austrian capital that saw history. Eli Hochenberg, I want to thank you very much for covering this story for the last 18 days in Austria. Thank you for being with us. But now the real battle begins, mostly for President Barack Obama in the United States, who immediately after the deal was announced and brought out to the world, began his battle to convince the world why this is, according to him, a good deal. Thomas Friedman from the New York Times had the chance to sit down with President Barack Obama yesterday, where he was given the first interview with the American president. Let's see what U.S. President Barack Obama had to say regarding Israel to New York Times, to the New York Times reporter and columnist Thomas Friedman.
What I've said to Prime Minister Netanyahu is, this is our best option to make sure that not just for the first 10 years, but for years afterwards, we have a verifiable inspection regime that ensures they do not obtain a nuclear weapon.
That would be President Obama actually addressing Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, the man mostly concerned about the deal signed yesterday. Let's go straight to Tal Shalev, who's standing by in Jerusalem, where the Israeli parliament is, where one man, namely Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, experienced his darkest nightmare come true yesterday, Tal, didn't he?
Well, definitely, and the reaction coming out of the Prime Minister's office last night was that now actually begins a new war, and we hear a senior Israeli official tell us they're going to fight this deal until our last drop of blood, and that is a quote. So yesterday evening, Netanyahu convenes a special cabinet meeting, security cabinet meeting, to brief the security cabinet ministers about the deal, and they hear briefings from the intelligence officials and from the head of the National Security Council, Yossi Cohen, who does say that there are two main flaws in the deal from Israel's point of view. The first one, that after 10 years, Iran can easily find a new way, a new pathway to a nuclear bomb, and can easily emerge out of this agreement as a nuclear threshold state. And the other one is that, meanwhile, hundreds of billions of dollars, the estimate here in Jerusalem is between $500 billion to $700 billion, will be pouring into Iran's economy. And from Israel's point of view, in Jerusalem, the assessment is that this money will only serve to, as Netanyahu says, fuel up the Iranian war of terror and aggression. Netanyahu also had a chance to speak with the president last night, but we could hear only a very diplomatic, only a very diplomatic readout of the call. We do know that the Americans are offering Israel a very generous compensation package, military and security compensation package. But at this point, two Israeli officials do tell us yesterday Israel does not intend to discuss this or even negotiate this with the Americans, because that would mean that Israel has come to terms with the deal. And as you mentioned earlier, the Israeli Prime Minister is preparing for a battle on Congress, despite the fact that most American commentators do speculate that it's very unlikely that Democrat senators will vote against the president.
Exactly, and as the American president mentioned yesterday in a speech, Tal, as we all know, that he will veto any congressional attempt to try and stop this deal. But Tal, still with us, it was John Kerry who actually came out. It seemed like President Obama was playing the good guy, calming the Israeli fears. Well, John Kerry, held no punches back, calling Netanyahu's vocal opposition to the deal, telling NBC News yesterday that the Israeli Prime Minister was making comments that are way over the top without having been fully briefed. So what is Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, planning to do now in terms of the battle when the congressional, door is fairly closed, if the president will veto it, and when the military options for Israel probably is off the table, irrespective of what the Prime Minister says? What can he do?
Well, the from the Israeli Prime Minister's point of view, there are flaws in the deal. There are, we speak to Israeli officials yesterday that point out that the snapback mechanism is very weak, that the restrictions on the research and development of advanced centrifuges are very weak, and that the inspection, the whole inspection process and the process of IAEA inspectors requesting access to suspicious sites is very weak and easy to bypass from the Iranian point of view. So these will be the points that Netanyahu will be stressing to Congress members. We just have to say there are very strong American forces working here. Netanyahu doesn't have to spearhead the effort or even lead the effort. It's enough that he will be briefing Congress members during the August recess. We do know of several delegations of lawmakers, American lawmakers, that will be arriving in Israel, will be meeting with Israeli officials, will be meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister. And Netanyahu has said that he will not stop to voice his opposition and his position regarding the Iranian nuclear threat. And the fact that that a deal has been signed doesn't change the fact that preventing a nuclear bomb is one of Israel's top priorities.
Top priorities, as he mentioned. Tal Shalev in Jerusalem will be with us throughout the day. Thank you for this bit of update. I want to open this discussion here on the table, as I said, joined by Raz Tzim and Amir Oren. Raz, let's go straight to Iran first to begin with. Because this, in many ways, not just for the American president, it is a victorious day for the Iranians. Did that transpire that way yesterday in Tehran?
I think Iran is preparing itself for the post-deal era, and for the post-deal reality, and this is a very difficult reality for Iran. Right. Yes, it is a victory for Iranians. It is a victory for Iranian president, for Iranian foreign minister. But as we could see yesterday, the demonstrations taking place in Tehran, you could see the level of expectation among Iranian youngsters, especially youngsters, not just to improve their economic conditions, which will be very difficult to deliver, but also the expectation for normalization, the relations between Iran and the United States, and even political reforms. They shouted slogans in support for their reformist opposition leader, Mir Hossein Mousavi. So if I were today Iranian leader...
What does that mean? Explain to our audience what does that mean. If they shout for Mousavi, that means that the administration
that at least some of them are not just after economic welfare. They are also after liberty, after civilian freedoms, right. And this might be of concern to the Iranian regime.
You and I had a chance to have a little chat outside the studio at the beginning of this day, and you showed us a picture. You showed me a picture of the celebrations yesterday in Iran of a young man, and I'm wondering if we can put this picture up. Well, first of all, these are the celebrations yesterday that Raz Tzim of Tel Aviv University has just mentioned. I mean, the streets full. We are seeing mostly young people. Rouhani clearly hailed. This is looking like a very victorious and I'm sure a day for Iran, and I'm sure was given as a very bitter pills in hallways in Jerusalem. And look at this picture. This is a young man. Raz, you were the one who showed us this picture this morning. I love USA is what that T-shirt spells. What does that picture spell to the Iranian administration?
In Iran, there are two main differences concerning the future of relations between Iran and the United States. Khamenei is opposed to any normalization in relations with the United States. He stressed throughout the negotiation that he is in favor of dialogue with the United States only over the nuclear issue. Right. He still considers the United States as the great Satan. Rouhani is more moderate, and the Iranians, the Iranian population, are much more moderate. They want normalization with the United States.
The new generation,
The new generation admires the United States, and this is something that the Supreme Leader has to be concerned of.
No, entirely, and I think that is what, and luckily we have Amir Oren with us in studio here for the devil in the details, but that is what the Americans are banking on when it comes to this deal. But the deal itself, specifically, at the end of the day, and if we take a quick look at what are the main points of it, is that, you know, and I think we have that also coming up, we have the inspectors will be given access to Iran's military facilities, but not immediately. Sanctions on Iran ballistic missiles will remain in place for 8 years, and the UN embargo in place for 8 years, and of course Iran to allow investigation of past nuclear tests. So if we're looking at these specific points, one of the things that is really concerning to all the people in this region or to Israel, and what Thomas Friedman actually asked the American president yesterday, and said this is not a good deal because Iran never really agreed to dismantle all the facilities, to simply dismantle them. And Iran cannot be trusted, and Iran is the devil, is what Netanyahu is saying, is what critics are saying in the U.S. This deal, why is it such a bad deal according to them, and isn't this something actually that you can contradict?
Well, no nuclear country or an almost nuclear country has ever capitulated to the point of dismantling its nuclear infrastructure due to outside pressure.
Right.
There have been cases because of some geopolitical changes in South Africa, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, where they voluntarily denuclearized. But it hasn't happened because countries have their pride, and countries are not going to do it. The question is, and it's really mind-boggling to see how rigid the Israeli leadership has spoken over the last 20 hours, because you do expect some constant vision, some worldview, but also some tactical flexibility. And neither Netanyahu nor his ministers, nor even his opposition leaders have shown this flexibility. What we saw in Tehran is not Iranian victory. It's the victory of diplomacy and the victory of hope. And these youngsters are joyous much the way people in Germany on both sides of the
world. I'm going to play
wall
devil's advocate.
Okay.
Iran being, let's say, Iran being the devil that people say, because in the past, Iran has committed itself to not trying to get to a nuclear bomb, and the world knows that it does not capitulate. It has not, made good on that promise. It is signed up on the non-proliferation agreement, but again, did not make good on that promise. And 10 years from now, according to critics, this deal enables Iran to be, again, a threshold state, a threshold nuclear state, but that can snap like that into nuclear capability, military one.
A very valid point. Not just like that. It would take them a year or so, during which time the U.S., Israel, the inspection mechanisms would find out and would presumably do so. Yes, yeah. They will find out. By the way, Iran went much further than what the NPT treaty and the additional protocol would make her comply, because no country has ever agreed that military facilities would be inspected. Even Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, had a way to bypass that. But the question is, what are you going to do with this time? Yeah. The delay, the 10 years, the 8 years for the ballistic missiles, the 5 years for the conventional weapons. Are you going to stand still and do nothing? Or are you going to exploit this time given? So Israel's security position is better this morning, contrary to what Netanyahu says. It's not worse off. It's better off. And
I'm assuming, though, that the argument that the Iranians cannot be trusted, Raz, seems to something that is being, that the mentality of the Iranian regime, I'm not talking about the peoples, because we all know that the peoples of this region always suffer, irrespective of where you are, because of regime battles. But the regime in Iran cannot give up on the rhetoric against Israel. Can it give up on the rhetoric against the United States?
I doubt it. Well, speaking about Khamenei, I doubt it.
Right.
Speaking about Rouhani and Zarif, yes. It's going to be very difficult to overlook the relationship established between Zarif and Kerry, for instance. But Khamenei, in my opinion, is going to be very. He's going to do his best to avoid any normalization in the relationship between Iran and the United States.
Right.
He considers the dialogue with the United States as something which he had to accept, a taboo broken, and he is going to be very insistent not to allow any further normalization with the United States.
Listening to Rouhani's speech yesterday, I'm wondering, because I'm sure that, could you decipher any other messages? Because it was fairly straightforward, but it was a very victorious speech. His reference to Israel, we did this in spite of people trying to prevent it, specifically Israel. So is that something we're going to look at more in the future?
Rouhani is again. He's looking for the new reality. He knows that his most difficult battle is starting now to improve the economic conditions of his people. He needs Khamenei to do that. He knows that Khamenei doesn't like a too strong president, and so he has to get his backup in the new reality. So he thanked Khamenei, and he hopes he can deliver his most important promise,
which was the
economic
issue. This is a time actually to look deep into this agreement, the agreement that, you know, people say it's the devil in the details, or the winner is in the actual signing. But we are joined now by Professor Uzi Arad, former National Security Advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former head of the Israeli National Security Council. Professor Arad, it's a very great honor to have you with us this morning. I'm assuming that you took a look at the main points of that agreement. And just looking at where we're standing right now, and it seems to be going ahead, and the U.S. president will not veto it, what can intelligence communities of the world do in order to maintain some sort of a watchful eye over Iran, given this agreement, and your personal opinion about this deal that was signed?
Well, indeed, this agreement is also challenging the intelligence services of the world, because it is their duty to monitor and to verify that indeed Iran is complying with the agreement, that it is acting in good faith, that it is not exploiting and abusing the agreement. And usually the intelligence services have to be the ones who provide their leaders with an accurate, not just assessment, but a statement of the facts. Now, not everything depends on the willingness of the Iranians to allow for verification measures, although that would help, and they have to do it. And this is called for precisely because they have violated previous agreements and they have cheated. With this kind of a record as building secret facilities like the one in Natanz and then the one in Fordo, all these were gross violations of previous agreements. So a token of skepticism is certainly in place, and they should be inspected. But on top of that, of course, intelligence services also use their own means of surveillance and the like, and some communities are quite powerful. I think only recently the United States has shown how technology is helping it to have a very, very thorough coverage of things happening worldwide. So this would be a challenge. And the challenge is essential not just to monitor, but also to take stock whether there is any violation, because if there would be a violation, if a secret facility suddenly would pop up, then the question would be what the reaction will be. Will people just, you know, be passive? Yeah. Will the reaction only be a reimposition of sanctions, which may not be prohibitive? Or will it be a much more assertive reaction, now having violated so grossly and in fact proceeding with a nuclear program? Then you have to resort to much more assertive means. Yeah. Now that's a critical decision that leaders may face in the future, and they would have to have the best intelligence at their hands with sufficient early warning that such violations may be taking place so that they can prepare the adequate response.
No, it's a fascinating point indeed, Professor Arad. What happens if something is found that's not actually mentioned in that deal? We have with us here in studio also our senior defense analyst, Amir Owen, who has a quick question for you.
Good morning, Professor Arad. You have been not only a seasoned global watcher, but also an experienced Netanyahu watcher for a while. When you were his national security advisor in the first years of his last term, he opposed the sanctions. He was very skeptical regarding the feasibility of sanctions having an impact on Iran. It turns out that he was wrong, that the sanctions have made an impact on Iran. And the question is, if Iran has shown itself to be a very rational actor, not bent on suicide, what does that mean regarding Netanyahu's current predictions about Iran's behavior for the next 10 years?
Well, you know, rationality, consistency, and empiricism, a very seasoned empiricism, would be a welcome quality to all involved in this. And we too have, and probably Netanyahu too have, to do some stock taking and look back at some of his judgments. But what we are seeing is indeed that the Iranians, more than they're being rational, because I don't like this concept, but they are certainly calculating people, and in advancing their interest, they have been proceeding very, very judiciously. So that, in a way, is a welcome development, because it is that kind of a partner or adversary you need so that you can influence one's decisions. So on the side of the Iranians, they are making calculations, and as we observed, sanctions matter. It's been said and mentioned in this program how expectations in Iran are that there would be an improvement in the economy and so forth. But what that indicates is that this instrument may be necessary to sustain current pressure or possibly new pressure if there would be need to do it, and it should be applied effectively. Now, Mr. Oren, let me call your attention to an interesting development. It now looks as if, thanks to the digital revolution and all these technological advancement, that the application of economic measures, financial measures, thanks to these refinements in following transactions, has rendered that instrument into a much more surgical instrument, a much more precise instrument. It has been applied more recently to Russia, for example. So one should capitalize on that and retain that instrument, certainly for the duration, and see how would that suffice to make the Iranians act, at least in accordance with their commitments. But I do fear that if the Iranians would decide, as a result of one consideration or another, to break out or to advance things beyond what they have committed to, the reapplications of sanctions would simply not suffice. Right. Because when they decide on doing that, they would have already factored into their thinking that that would be the reaction. So they're willing to take it. They may be willing to bite the bullet for some kind of a promise at the end of the tunnel. So the kind of thing we do need to obtain now clearly from the American president is an assurance to his own people, because it is to the American people that the president has to respond, but also to us and America's allies, that if there would be a violation of the agreement, it would not be only sanctions, it will be sanctions added by something which may be much more direct and would impact directly on the nuclear program, and that it did not suffice. It would decide the issue. It would decide the issue. Professor Uzi Arad, I want to thank you very much for joining us this morning. Fascinating points, and sadly, all the time that we have. But as you heard it here, as Razin mentioned, it started off as an economic relief that made the Iranians happy. Time will tell if the world will stick abide and if the regime will abide by it. But when we get back, reactions from around the world to this historic agreement between world powers and Iran differ very, very, very much. We will take a closer look at the flurry that were the reactions as of yesterday. Do stay with us. First, more of the morning headlines. I-24 News Morning Edition on the place you should be on this July 15th. Yeah, thank you very much. 2015, the day after history was made or destroyed, according to some, a day after a deal is signed in Vienna between the P5+1 and the United States. First, though, let's start with Amin Kaufman with the day, which was here daily to discuss the news you missed while scanning the headlines, and boy, was there a lot of it.
Boy, there was a lot. Let's take a look at some of the local headlines first. We have some papers here in the studio with us. This is Yediot Ahronot, probably one of the most, not probably, one of the most mainstream leading papers. Yeah. The headline is mass circulation. Thank you. The headline here is the world surrendered to Iran. With a picture of Rouhani on the front. They gave 20 pages inside, and of course in the middle spread we have the most important spread of the paper, Iranians celebrating
end of sanctions.
End of sanctions.
Wow.
Here in the Israeli Haaretz, the broadsheet, the Israeli New York Times, we have pretty much a subdued kind of coverage. Not even they didn't even go. Excuse me, they didn't even go below the fold. You know, when I was working at the paper, I would have done something a little different there.
Really Israel's gray old lady.
Yeah, only 6 pages there. We have some front pages pictures also. We have, I think, Yisrael Hayom, the Sheldon Adelson paper.
The Sheldon Adelson
front
paper.
Page. Let's take a look at this picture.
And there we go.
This one, if a free translation is, I think, an agreement that is an eternal disgrace.
Yes.
Look at that headline, and we also have a Haaretz in English, which is a translation of course, the Haaretz. A pretty subdued headline as well, alongside deal to curb Iranian nuclear program sealed in Vienna. Let's see how the Iranians themselves are covering this. We have a headline from Press TV, Iranian media outlet. This headline was pretty much the whole day on top of it. Israel PM urged to quit as Iran nuclear talks end. This is something, of course, that former finance minister Yair Lapid said. This was pretty much on the whole day on Press TV. That's that they had on top of their site.
Wow.
Little, I guess you call it a Schadenfreude there.
Rouhani yesterday said that Israel failed. This was his.
Yes,
yeah, Rouhani said that Israel failed. I think there was Mohammad Jawad Zarif gave an interview to MSNBC, the Iranian foreign minister, specifically addressing Netanyahu as well, that his propaganda and that Netanyahu's propaganda and rhetoric failed as well. But it's just fascinating to see this play out between the trifecta that is the United States, Israel, and Iran.
Trifecta, what a word.
That is, you know, that is being played out digitally, on papers, having digital conversations. It's
well, the way it's being playing out on social media.
On social media,
they immediately go to Twitter. It's crazy.
Right.
As I told you yesterday, I was hard-pressed to find op-eds that really support this deal, that are really optimistic about it. Here's one from The Guardian, from Richard Dalton. He is the former British ambassador to Iran. The headline here is, "This Iran nuclear deal is built to last. It is a tremendous achievement for non-proliferation and regional security. For 3 reasons, he believes it will stick. There are effective provisions to guard against cheating." I don't know about that.
There is no such thing as a guard against cheating.
He also said that while there will be resistance in the U.S. Congress, there are grounds for optimism that they will not succeed in undermining the deal. And thirdly, Iran is tired of being punished. That's what Richard Dalton thinks.
Okay.
An amazing op-ed we have from the New York Times. I think it's the best analysis I've heard so far. David E. Sanger, who we had who was interviewed here on I-24 recently. He's a bit, you know, kind of on both sides, I guess, of the fence. His ideas is for President Obama, the deal struck Tuesday morning with Iran represents a similar leap of faith. He's comparing it to what happened between Nixon and China. A leap of faith that what Nixon did in China 40 years ago.
I think the Obama administration would like the world to compare it to. I think that's,
even if just for a decade or so, he and his successors would have the time and space to restructure one of the United States' deepest adversarial relationships. So he's saying this is a big bet. We're going to have to see how it plays out in another 10 years. When Obama will not be in office anymore.
Right.
And of course,
one last one for, you know.
Breitbart, the extreme right wing. You know, when I think Breitbart, I think Rush Limbaugh. Let's take a look at this headline. A terrible deal. Nuclear agreement reached with Iran. And you know what? We know where they took this quote from, a terrible deal? Also from former finance minister Yair Lapid, who said that it was a terrible deal. So Yair Lapid is on Breitbart, basically.
Never been so popular.
Exactly. And within the opposition, I saw his Yair Lapid's Facebook status yesterday calling this a deal that's not worth the paper it's signed on.
Right.
So at least there's a unanimous opinion within the Israeli coalition and opposition that this is a bad deal. Yeah. But as we move on, it is, of course, no secret that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did everything he could over the course of the last 3 years to halt the deal reached yesterday from being achieved. So much so to the extent that he has become a virtual persona non grata within the Obama administration White House. Netanyahu first fiercely criticized the nuclear agreement yesterday, calling it a stunning, historic mistake. After the deal was reached, the U.S. President Obama called the Israeli Prime Minister and was told by him that the deal threatens the security of Israel and that of the entire world. Obama, on his part, reacted to Netanyahu, or so we are told, that the U.S. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter will visit Israel next week to discuss ways to strengthen security cooperation between the two nations. That said, relations that weren't well between U.S. and Israel up in arms right now. In his speech address shortly after the deal in Vienna was announced, President Obama had a clear and strong message, though, for Israel, which is one that he will most likely be holding over the course of the next weeks to try and sell this deal both at home and across the world. Let's take a look at what he said, President Obama, yesterday in his speech, specifically regarding Israel and Iran's enemies, and take it from there.
We share the concerns expressed by many of our friends in the Middle East, including Israel and the Gulf states, about Iran's support for terrorism and its use of proxies to destabilize the region.
But that is precisely why we are taking this step. Because an Iran armed with a nuclear weapon would be far more destabilizing and far more dangerous to our friends and to the world. Meanwhile, we will maintain our own sanctions related to Iran's support for terrorism, its ballistic missile program, and its human rights violations. We will continue our unprecedented efforts to strengthen Israel's security, efforts that go beyond what any American administration has done before.
Break this down and see what it all means when it comes to Israeli-American relations. As we saw, we are joined in the studio by I-24 News senior editor Ruthie Sinai.
Good morning.
And also by former Director General of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, Mr. Yosef Kupperwasser. Good morning to you. Ami, still with us. Mr. Kupperwasser, I want to ask you, because there is, the chiming in of how bad a deal this is by Prime Minister Netanyahu. John Kerry almost reacting immediately to him, saying that he has not read it in detail. Ron Dermer coming out in the Washington Post. But I want to ask you, why is this such a bad deal if the people who support it say that Iran has just been prevented over the course of the next 10 years, as opposed to if there was no deal, trying to reach a nuclear threshold capability, so to speak, in a year?
Well, the main reason that the deal is so bad is that everything that President Obama said yesterday is wrong.
How so?
He says that all the avenues through which Iran can get a nuclear weapon are blocked, and in fact, many of those are not blocked. And first of all, even if the Iranians follow the deal, in 10 to 15 years, they will be able to develop an arsenal of nuclear weapons. So how does that deal blocks Iran from having a nuclear weapon? Secondly, when it comes to sneak out during the deal, trying to develop a deal, develop a weapon, not in the facilities that are under
within the deal. Yeah.
That are mentioned within the deal. There's no way to block it because in two avenues that are referred to in the deal. One, doing it in Iran. There's no way to enter those sites without Iranian consent, and the Iranians are, in order to give this consent, they have the right to demand to see the intelligence. So nobody's going to show them the intelligence. So this is not going to happen ever. And secondly, if they are going to try to do that outside of Iran, according to the deal, they have to ask for permission to have some cooperation with foreign entities. But there is no article in the deal that says what kind of supervision and inspection is going to be there and what they're going to do outside of Iran. If the Iranians are going now to develop their weapons somewhere else, there's no way to find it out. So it's all based, from now on, blocking Iran from having a nuclear weapon is based totally on what Israel is going to do intelligence-wise and in other means. This deal puts an unbelievable burden on Israel to block Iran from having a nuclear weapon.
And the question remains to be seen how much information Israel will get from the United States intelligence-wise. But, cards on the table right now, this is the time to start easing in the relations between those two countries. Let's put in also to the conversation Rebecca Shimoni-Stoll from Washington, D.C. Rebecca, when it comes to the Israel-U.S. relations, which seem to be worse off than ever right now, given all the flurry of statements being made, what is the American administration planning to do when it comes to Israel and its reaction to this deal?
Well, good morning. First of all, I think it's important to note that from the position of the administration, their first goal, of course, is not necessarily mending fences Jerusalem, but getting this deal through Congress. And that's their major focus. And they've already started basically engaging in a certain amount of strategic outreach to the American Jewish community in an effort to try to seal the deal, to get the deal through Congress. And that, of course, right now is their number one priority. I think that that's going to be largely preoccupying them for the next 30 to 60 days as this deal is kind of digested on Capitol Hill. Now, regarding Israel, I think they see a kind of longer picture here. Obviously, Netanyahu's statements were not received well in Washington today, to say the least. Right. On the other hand, there's a lot on the table. We have coming up in the next, in the fall, there's the United Nations General Assembly, and that's a traditional time when Israel expects to see the United States standing close to Israel, and that is a potential, an opportunity at least, for the Obama administration to work on mending fences. But whether they'll actually utilize that opportunity or whether we're going to see kind of continued sour grapes over a deal that's already been done that remains to be seen.
That does remain to be seen. Rebecca, staying with us, though. But when it comes to the battle there in Congress, I think Ruth Sinai, that's something that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is hoping to wage or help his colleagues, his Republican colleagues, one will say, in Congress. What can he do if we're gleaming from those things?
First of all, I thought it was interesting that he had Joe Biden by his side when he made that statement. You know, Biden is his outreach to Congress. That was a clear signal. If I may, I'd like not to answer your question. I'd actually like to put a question to Mr. Kuperwasser. You said that this agreement places an unbelievable burden on Israel to block this bad deal. So here's my question. I mean, the days Israel can't go it alone. Israel needs. I mean, for all that it's got all the capabilities and all the intelligence, it cannot go it alone. It's going if it really decides to do something, i.e., a military option. So it's going to need the United States. Now, given that relations with the United States, at least under this administration, are horrible and going to get horribler.
So it seems.
How do you see this playing out?
Well, first of all, we don't know who's going to be in charge in the United States in the coming 10 years.
Yes,
it's a long
but if
time.
this deal is signed still, it's signed. It will not be able, and the next American president will not be able to reverse it that quickly.
It's true, but I think that we still have very strong relations with the United States. And, in the past, there were several times in which either we declared or some other people thought that we did all kinds of operations in spite of the American position, and we did them pretty successfully. So,
you talk about Iraq in 1980?
Amongst others, yes.
And Syria as of several years ago.
So we are very capable. And I wouldn't advise anybody to underestimate our capabilities. Because when it comes to defending ourselves, we should do whatever is necessary.
Indeed,
the point is that it's very costly. That's the point. It can be costly also in political terms, definitely in budgetary terms, definitely in military terms.
And in fatalities, if Hezbollah, for instance, decides to
it can be costly, but we have to block Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Now, this deal is dangerous. We didn't finish because even the breakout option is very much there. If they decide at any point, especially after 5 years, when they get the special weaponry from the Russians, and they are much better equipped to defend themselves, if they decide at that time to rush to a bomb, because there is some political situation that enables them to move forward, the fact is that all the centrifuges are still there. They are held in the facility in Natanz, in the underground facility in Natanz, in Hall B, as it states in the agreement. So it was going to take a few weeks before they're going to have 20,000 centrifuges, and the Fordow facility that President Obama himself said that this facility has to be destroyed. This facility is not destroyed, and about 1,000 centrifuges are left over there. So the breakout option is still there, and in spite of what the Americans are saying, that it's going to take them a year to obtain enough fissile material for the first bomb, the fact is that this can be done in much, much less time according to this agreement. This is a very dangerous agreement.
And again,
and I put aside the terrorism and all of that.
What the critics all say, but that said, Ruthie, in the short time that we have, when we're looking at what Israel is trying, I mean, we're looking at a flurry right now, such as Ron Dermer, the Israeli ambassador to Israel, putting his opinion in the Washington Post.
Right, that's like the opening salvo of the campaign. This is going to be a very well-funded campaign in the U.S. There's, multi-million dollars. They're really pulling out all the stops. Right. They've got the U.S. lobby, the Jewish lobby on board. They've got campus groups. They've got, obviously, they're briefing.
I think that the most important thing is what Hillary Clinton is going to say. What she said yesterday was a bit on the side of Obama, but not totally there. And the most important thing is to see what Hillary Clinton is going to say. She's the leading candidate on the Democratic side, and many Democratic senators are going to be.
She already sanctioned the deal, and Hillary Clinton.
Pretty much. I mean,
pretty much said that it's a
but we have to remember that in last October she said clearly Iran shouldn't have even one centrifuge.
I think the next year will play it out. It is where the game begins, one would say, rather than where a deal ended and the game itself begins. Do stay with us. We will be taking a look at the Arab world reactions to this historic deal that was signed yesterday in Vienna. First, though, as in every morning, the news. Welcome back. It is still Wednesday, July 15th, 2015. This is still the morning edition on I-24 News, and presumably a new Middle East. In the special edition, we are taking a closer look at the historic deal signed yesterday between the P5+1 and Iran, a deal that many critics are touting and saying that it is a very frightening deal if one was to listen to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but reactions coming in from around the world. That said, one thing that is rarely discussed or has rarely been discussed in detail, at least on this show this morning, is the amount of money that is involved in this deal and how much money the world, be it Europe, be it the United States, Iran itself, and the Middle East, stand to gain from it. Let's start off firstly in London, where Jonathan Sachadati, I-24 News contributor, is standing by. And in that respect, Jonathan, for example, yesterday already, before the deal itself was announced, but rumors were swirled that it was going to happen, it raised the prospect of a fresh oil gut. But you're sitting in Europe. When it comes to the money that is involved in this deal, what are the reactions? What is the information that we can glean this morning? In addition to that, also, how much money is Europe standing to gain?
Well, money is, of course, a very big concern to many of those in Europe who are looking to this as an opportunity to make a lot of it. When we see the European Union Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini emphasize the new chapter in international relations, we only need to look over to British Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond, whose comment upon the signing of the deal was that the big prize here is that as Iran comes out of the isolation of the last decades and is much more engaged with Western countries, Iranians hopefully begin to travel in larger numbers again. Western companies are able to invest, he said, and trade with Iran, and there is an opportunity for an opening now. And sure enough, there are huge commercial benefits to be talked of here. Aerospace, for example, is one industry which could benefit enormously. Iranian and Western aerospace industry officials estimate that Iran, a country of 80 million people, will need 400 aircraft worth up to $20 billion in the next decade, something that the Airbus group in Europe will be looking to benefit from. And according to Ascend Flight Global, a UK consultancy, Iran's fleet of jetliners are 23 years old on average, meaning that there is scope for a refresh of that fleet with new planes. That's just one example. German trade could blossom enormously. Germany's exports to Iran could as much as quadruple in the next few years, with German industry associations predicting that sort of growth. German companies will be competing with Chinese, Korean, Middle East, and other rivals who filled that void left by Western companies prevented from trading under the sanctions. So we're looking at companies like Volkswagen and Siemens, and then thousands of smaller family-owned German firms who are keen to reclaim their role exporting to Iran, modernizing the oil industry maybe, giving some opportunities there, and also the possibility of exports to Iran leaping to more than 10 billion euros in the medium term from 2.4 billion last year. Cars, chemicals, healthcare, renewable energy industries could also benefit. This is an enormous opportunity for European commerce.
And yeah, which one can, ponder and think what led many sitting around that table of the world powers in Vienna for that deal, because yes, as you mentioned, putting it in layman's terms, that is a lot of money involved. Jonathan Sachadati, thank you for being with us this morning. Now, the agreement between world powers and Iran over its nuclear program provoked sharp reactions across the Arab world yesterday. For decades, the United States has been closer to Saudi Arabia, so the agreement and the great effort President Obama invested in reaching it led parties on both sides in the Gulf state to suspect it marked a strategic realignment, with the United States moving away from its traditional Sunni allies. Saudi Arabia and its regional allies see Iran as the driver of much of the region's violence, pointing to its deep divisions and also pointing to its actually deep support for President Bashar al-Assad. Let's take a look at the following piece about the Arab world reactions and break it down from there.
In May 2015, leaders of the Gulf countries gathered in Washington to meet with U.S. President Barack Obama. This extraordinary gesture by the American president had a clear message. The U.S. would not abandon its allies in the Gulf, even if negotiations on Iran's nuclear program ended in an agreement with Tehran.
I am reaffirming our ironclad commitment to the security of our Gulf partners. As we've declared in our joint statement, the United States is prepared to work jointly with GCC member states to deter and confront an external threat to any GCC state's territorial integrity that is inconsistent with the UN Charter.
Now that a deal on Iran's nuclear program has been reached, Gulf countries are adjusting to the new reality. A Saudi official told Reuters Tuesday that a nuclear deal with Iran will mean a happy day if it stops Iran from acquiring a nuclear arsenal, but a bad agreement would allow Tehran to wreak havoc in the region. Obama tried to ease the concerns of Iran's opponents.
That is precisely why we are taking this step. Because an Iran armed with a nuclear weapon would be far more destabilizing and far more dangerous to our friends and to the world.
Relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran have been on the collision course recently after the two countries became involved in the conflict in Yemen, a war between Tehran-backed Shiite Houthi rebels who took over major areas in the country, and opposing them, a Saudi-led coalition. Meanwhile, in Syria, President Bashar al-Assad welcomed the agreement, suggesting he expects Iran to increase its support in its fight in the Syrian civil war once the deal is implemented. Iran is one of Assad's biggest allies in the region and a supporter of the Shiite group Hezbollah, now helping Assad's forces in their battle against extremist jihadist groups like the Islamic State and the Al-Nusra Front. As it stands now, it is uncertain who the deal will strengthen and by how much. But it does seem that the balance of power in the Middle East may change a day after the deal is signed.
Joined in studio by I-24 News senior Middle East analyst Ali Waqed. Ali, good morning to you. Also by research fellow at the INSS and lecturer at the Tel Aviv University, Dr. Benedetta Berti. Good morning to you. Let's start off immediately, shortly, with the money, because we all heard how much money Europe is standing to gain. But when it comes to the concern of the Arab world, Ali, I'm going to start with you. Iran is standing to gain a lot of money from this deal. Why does that frighten, and what was the frighten Saudi, frighten the Gulf states so much? What will it spell for Iran as the new power or as a power within the region?
Because, of course, the Saudis and the Arab states are not expecting to see a change in the Iranian policy just because they signed the agreement yesterday with the international community, the Saudis, and with them. Most of the Arab countries believe that the Iranian, the conservative wing in the Iranian regime will invest this money in strengthening the organizations, the Shiite organizations, the Shiite militias, and the allies of the Iranians in the region. And this money will not be used only to rehabilitate the Iranian economy, but also to strengthen the policy of Iran in the region, and to strengthen the regimes that are supported by the Iranians. We should make no mistake, Yael. Zarif and Rouhani were the one who signed the agreement. The implementation of the agreement, and especially the partition of the money, will be decided not by Zarif and Rouhani, but will by Qasem Soleimani from the Revolutionary Guards, by Khamenei, and the members of the conservative wing that sees this agreement as an opportunity to strengthen Iran's position in the region, in parallel to its getting back to the front of the international scene. And now Iran is perceived as a legitimate member, maybe, in the coalition against the Islamic State. So the Iranian will use this money in order to do two main things: to rehabilitate their economy standing, but also to strengthen Iran's position in the region and Iran allies in the region.
In Iran allies in the region, not to mention, we all know that Iran is involved in so many proxy wars in and around the region, be it in Yemen, between it and Saudi. Dr. Berti, when you're looking at this, one of the main American concerns over the course of leading up to this deal, whether overtly out to the world or not, is that Iran is needed because America is losing a desperate war within the region against ISIS. In your educated opinion, is this something that Iran has been selling? Is it something that they can really help with? Because we know the Iraqi army in its non-existence is failing in that position. Or is that something they're not even looking to do? And what, of course, does this spell for its proxy armies around the region?
Right. Well, I think we should be very clear about what this deal was about, and it was about the nuclear negotiation, the nuclear file. It was not about Iran's involvement in Syria. It was not about Iranian support for Hezbollah, and it was not about the international efforts against the Islamic State. So these issues were not at the center of the negotiations. Therefore, to expect that the Iranian policy on Syria, on Hezbollah, on its regional involvement would change because of this deal, I think that's just a flawed assumption. They're not going to. So we should assume continuity of policy and interest. Now, is there some room for cooperation between the international coalition to fight ISIS and Iran? Yes, because they share an interest. They have a common enemy. But let's not take this too far to say there is strategic convergence of interest, meaning Iran has a very specific interest for the region. That interest involves backing Bashar al-Assad, involves a stronger Iraq that is closer to Iran. These are not interests that the United States shares with Iran.
But
and there was an expectation in the Arab world that this policy of Iran would be put on the table and would be maybe an item in this agreement that the international community will condition the signature of an accord with Iran and demand Iran to change its policy. And I think this is the frustration of the Arab world, seeing that the trade-off of arms and the Iranian policy in the region were not even raised in these negotiations, not directly, but also not indirectly.
Very, very, very true, which is also the time to be joined from Cairo by I-24 News contributor Jake Worcester, who's sitting by. And one of the discussions here where there was not just things that weren't mentioned in that agreement, but also Arab leaders in the region looking at it, be it Saudi Arabia, who people are warning will now try to also acquire a nuclear weapon, or somebody like Sisi in Egypt, where you're sitting, who most likely will say, well, if my partners are getting that, why not me? And it's this whole notion of the possible actually reversed effect. But what are the reactions, in and around the Arab world and where you're sitting in Cairo to the historic deal signed yesterday?
Look, there's no people who are more disappointed and more upset or who can talk as angry as your friend General Cooper Wasser about the deal than the Syrian opposition and the Syrian Islamic armed opposition that Washington is disappointed year after year in its struggle against Bashar al-Assad. And, they are the folks who are the most angry and the most vocal about the deal and what it represents in terms of Iranian strategic gains in the Middle East. I think everybody else has already factored this in. And with the Egyptians, I'm actually really surprised by how relaxed they've been about this. It wasn't even on any of the talk shows last night. It was all about Sisi and his reform plan for Islamic instruction at Al-Azhar University, and reimagining what it might be to be a martyr in the 21st century, and the parents are martyrs for their children's education. And it was like, it wasn't even talked about here yesterday, except that the foreign ministry reminded the world that Egypt has a long-standing policy of non-proliferation of nuclear weapons in the region, and there was a successful negotiation about that. And oh, here's a reminder: Egypt is for a nuclear-free Middle East, which is like actually a dig at Israel. So then the Saudis, of course, you know this, are in a completely different place. They had their big GCC summit yesterday. But I think the interesting thing is how their tone is so quiet and so measured. And so we welcome negotiations, but we're looking for a responsible brand that spends the money responsibly.
Exactly. And then I think if anybody, then Sisi's standing by quietly to see how this plays out. But Ali, you wanted to say...
I'm glad we had Jacob from Cairo, because it reminded me that one of the concerns of the Saudis is that the Iranian will try to divide the Arab coalition in investing in Egypt and also in Jordan as the weak members of the Arab coalition, and to try to spread the Iranian influence also in countries that are allies of the GCC and of the Saudis. The Egyptian economy will be in need of an Iranian investment. The Egyptians will appreciate if employees and workers from Egypt will go and work in the very new Iranian economy. And this is why the Egyptians were indifferent, did not condemn the agreement as the Saudis expected from them. The Saudis in the last weeks invested tens of billions in the Egyptian economy, yet the Egyptians did not comment the agreement of yesterday.
Finally, Benedict, Dr. Birdie of the NSS, I want to quickly out loud with you. At the end of the day, as you said, we should not confuse the policies in Iran with this deal and whatnot, that this is not ending. Are we looking at a strengthening of Hezbollah also?
Well, if we want to look at who has been very happy about this deal, Hezbollah is one of them. They've been for weeks saying that they support the nuclear negotiations. you could see on Al Manar, on Hezbollah's TV channel, you could see President Obama's speech being broadcasted. So you can.
That's a sign of the times.
That's
yes,
a sign
that
of
is
the
a sign of the times.
That tells you that Hezbollah is happy to see its strategic partner in Iran in a better position. Economic relief for Iran inevitably means some economic relief for Hezbollah.
For Hezbollah as well. Sadly, all the time that we have on this fascinating take. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Dr. Birdie. And, of course, thank you, Jake, in Cairo, Egypt, with us this morning. When we get back, a different take on this deal. Actually, the cultural influences the United States is hoping will infiltrate Iran. We will take a closer look. First now, though, the news. Good morning, I-24 News Morning Edition on this July 15th, 2015. Some are saying it's the end of the world as we know it. Some will say that is actually the morning of a new dawn and a peaceful one in the Middle East. Yes, I am speaking about that historic deal signed yesterday in Vienna between the P5+1 and Iran that we have been reviewing over the course of this show. But it is the time to introduce yet again Ami Kaufman, the man, the bow tie.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning.
Exactly. The man in the bow tie.
Exactly.
With the viral spiral that is the web review, that is anything and everything that was spanning around the internet yesterday when it comes to the deal yesterday, the days before. And of course, with this also, the lovely Shachar Peled will take a closer look at what cultural effects this deal may have on Iran, the region, and whatnot. But Ami, viral spiral web Iranian review.
All about Iran. We're going to kind of like divide this into two segments: what happened before, or a day and a half before the deal came, and what happened during and after. So let's start with Global Voices, which brought some memes about what the journalists were doing there, waiting for the deal. And they had some memes that they put out, some of the journalists. Yes. And this is a really good one. Look at this. It's like when you see on your computer when you're downloading something.
Right.
So this is the Iran deal, and just keeps loading and loading and loading, and it's not happening.
It's like the computers at work.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
And we have another one from Twitter. This is it looks like a snail with the deal on its back, and it's reaching for the deadline, trying to get to the deadline, just not happening. And here's another one with, of course, Zarif, who's kind of channeling like a Salvador Dali, I guess. There, the persistence of memory dripping on his clock. Everybody's waiting. And another famous one with Patrick Stewart from Star Trek, Captain Luke Picard. The famous meme. This one says, it says in Arabic here, why won't they get to a blasted agreement already?
Thank you.
With his hand stretched out.
With his hand, come on, yes. Yeah, Captain's Journal number, yes.
The Boston Globe has a great piece about what the American team was doing the whole time when it was waiting there. And so it said, as we can see in the headline here, the U.S. negotiating team here over the past 5 weeks has gone through 10 pounds of Twizzlers, strawberry flavored, 20 pounds of string cheese, 30 pounds of mixed nuts and dried fruit, and more than 200 Rice Krispie treats.
I'm sorry. No. Stop on this one because it also it interlaces Shachar in.
Exactly.
I know why
it's part of the Iranian scheme. They want them to die from all these sweets.
Either part of that scheme or the Iranians saw all that junk food.
Yes.
And said we cannot let this in to Iran.
Negotiations.
They're going to stop it. Yes.
It gets even better though. The number of espresso pods we've gone through is in the hundreds, one official said. And we have, while they were waiting, the team kind of thought, okay, if they make a movie about this, about the deals, who's going to play who? And let's see this next picture.
Brilliant.
According to, they said Ted Danson would play Carrie.
Hold on, this is an uncanny resemblance.
Okay, wow, and look at Ernest Moniz would be played by Javier Bardem from No Country for Old Men.
Exactly.
Marie Harf would be played by Kirsten Dunst.
Definitely.
Okay.
And of course, Meryl Streep would play Sandy Herman.
And
Wendy
that
Herman.
The Prada, The Devil Wears Prada, where she looked exactly like her.
I think that's a fun game.
No, that's
I wonder who would play me if, of course, would be.
You would play you, honey.
No, Bruce Willis.
Bruce.
That's my doppelganger.
How about me? Just kidding. Yes.
Okay, as we know, Prime Minister Netanyahu went to Twitter in the Farsi language a day or two before the declaration. Now, Iranians did not like this, as the Fars news agency can tell us. Iranians showed disgust for Israeli PM's Persian tweets.
Yes.
Analysts believe that the measure would cause increased hatred for Israel and Netanyahu Netanyahu himself. This is what the Fars agency says. And one analyst said, there could never be any better move to run negative PR against Israel than Netanyahu's Persian tweets.
And that cartoon is incredible.
This is something else totally. Yeah. This is from the front page of the Itamad Daily. This is the day before the agreement came into, it's called Netanyahu's loneliness. That's what the caption says.
I have to say about the tweets, I understand there's a lot of mistakes in the Prime Minister's tweeting account in Farsi.
Really?
Yes, anyone who knows Farsi just said it's less than Google Translate Farsi.
That's embarrassing.
So yes, someone needs to take care of that.
No, exactly. And if you already do that, which in itself is a commendable effort.
Take an expert.
Exactly.
So easy.
I can give you numbers if people speak
Farsi.
Okay, exactly.
Okay, now the deal came in, and everybody's talking about economic repercussions, talking about money, about oil.
Right.
But did you know that we also have to talk about caviar and pistachios, because part of the small number
Persian caviar is amazing.
Part of the small number of non-financial trade sanctions the U.S. agreed to lift as part of the deal, the U.S. agreed to lift the ban on licensing the import of Iranian foodstuffs, listing in particular Iranian caviar and pistachio nuts. And as we can see in the next tweet, this is what people are calling the most important clause in the agreement.
Definitely.
Let's read what it says.
Yes.
Clause 5.1.3, license the importation into the United States of Iranian origin carpets and foodstuff, including pistachios and caviar. This is the most important clause in the agreement.
No, I have to say, have any of you had Iranian caviar?
No, but I've seen Iranian carpets.
Okay.
So I can
Iranian
relate
caviar,
to that.
Actually, I'll hand it to him. It's fabulous.
Yes?
It's fabulous.
Good for them.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Iran was one of the largest producers.
Important issues here about this deal.
Yeah,
yes.
Iran was one of the largest exporters and producers of caviar because it's on the border with the Caspian Sea.
Exactly. No, fabulous stuff there. Yeah.
And some more pictures from Twitter. This is from Avi Meyer, who took a picture where the Iran deal was reached. It's at Vienna's Palais Coburg on the Theodor Herzl Platz. He thought that was very symbolic. I kind of agree with him. That's interesting.
No, yeah.
It's interesting.
Talk about irony. And I'm stuck with this. I don't think Mohammad Jawad Zarif, the foreign minister of Iran, ever thought he would stand on the balcony and have some people sitting in Israel comparing him to Theodor Herzl, who envisioned the Zionist nation. Yeah. Yes, okay.
In Vienna, I founded the Iran deal.
I'm sure
he's very pleased about
Here's
it
one
now.
from Iran, from Tehran. People watching the Obama speech in Tehran with Rouhani on the other side. That's a really nice picture because the split screen there with Obama and Rouhani.
This in itself is extraordinary. It's extraordinary because that, to me, yesterday in that moment, when both Obama and Rouhani spoke, that was the moment.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
It was the moment because it was almost like a digital conversation.
That's a picture that's going to...
both standing, extraordinary moment in television. Yes.
Here's some pictures from the newspapers in Tehran today where we put pictures of Muhammad Zarif comparing him to Iranian legends known as Arash Kamangar. Here's Arash the Archer there on the left, and Amir Kabir, he is Iran's first reformer. Everybody really in Iran is in love with this man apparently right now.
He's become like the superhero of the negotiations.
Totally.
Yeah.
The White House took to Twitter to try to spin its take on the deal.
As it started the long battle down that road.
With infographics. And here's one. The tweet says, "What would happen if there was a deal and if there wasn't a deal?" The top one, if there wasn't a deal. They would get to, as you can see, they would get to the missiles in 2 to 3 months.
Sorry, yeah.
And in the bottom, it says all 4 pathways to a bomb are blocked. And everybody underneath that was saying that is a load of BS. I will not elaborate.
But I have to say, because it's reminiscent to me actually of Netanyahu standing in the UN stage with a little cardboard plaque. With the little bomb. Why did world politicians insist on making these little...
I think Netanyahu has an influence on people, doesn't he?
No, seriously, because when the White House tweets,
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought Netanyahu because this is my last picture from Twitter. This is an Iranian artist called Bojrogmer Hosseinpour.
Okay.
Remember when Netanyahu was on the UN stage and pointing to the bomb?
As I just said.
He has the head of
the head of Mohammad Jawad Zarif and Netanyahu sweating.
And he's sweating, yeah.
Wow.
And he's sweating. It's really nice question.
Okay, no, fascinating and definitely shows exactly where the wind is blowing. But that would be the time to see a perfect transition to the lovely Shachar Peled, cultural correspondent, where, when it comes to culture, when it comes to the influences that I think the West is hoping will find their way into Iran, where does that stand?
Yes, so we see it's, first of all, we're heading towards an American-Iranian love story of some sort, but we'll start with consumerism first, because, first of all, 65% of the population in Iran are under 35, so this is a great population to push in all the American stuff too.
Right.
And they love it. First of all, there are already malls inside Iran, American-style malls and grocery stores. We see these all the time, but this is a great potential for American companies which have been for decades absent from Iran and really want to go into there. We're talking about Apple and Dell brands who have been in negotiations with sort of local resellers to try and sell their products, but it has been always unofficial. We could be starting to see major Apple stores in Iran. Also, we have seen versions of bootleg American restaurants and coffee shops. We've got McDonald's and Pizza Hut. This really suggests opportunities for U.S. franchises to expand and thrive.
I almost feel a little bad for McDonald's.
Well, however, Coca-Cola and Pepsi are going very strong in Iran, as opposed to the Zamzam Cola that is the local brand. Still, Coca-Cola wins.
I really want to try Zamzam.
It sounds very interesting, in fact. And with a female population of nearly 40 million in Iran, it's the second largest cosmetics market in the Middle East after Saudi Arabia. Let's see a short VTR on how this could finally open to the American culture.
Let's take a look.
With a population of 77 million, almost half of whom are women, Iran is the second biggest cosmetics market in the Middle East, behind Saudi Arabia, and the 7th biggest in the world.
There's a lot of people that are coming and are buying high prices.
I don't spend a lot on makeup. I want quality products and it takes me months to finish them. I'd say I spend around 5% of my income on cosmetics.
Makeup is a form of personal expression in Iran. Women here are required to cover their hair when in public, regardless of their religion. But wearing makeup doesn't violate the Islamic Republic's laws because the Quran doesn't prohibit perfume or cosmetics. And with such a young population, cosmetics companies have a captive consumer base. But products from officially sanctioned distributors are beyond the reach of many. With Western sanctions fanning a severe economic crisis, 60% of the market is supplied by bootleggers.
And now these could be within reach, so it could be a very tremendous change as American music and movies, which have been extremely popular in Iran before the revolution.
Exactly.
Audrey Hepburn, Peter O'Toole were big celebrities in Iran. Yeah. The older generations remembers them. And after the revolution, Khomeini banned almost all movies, but those who presented a tarnished image of the West. So you can still go to the movies and see One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, for example, where Jack Nicholson, a criminal into a mental hospital, and theaters showed this for over a year in Iranian theaters because, this is how the West looks like. So these are films that you could see ongoing in Iranian theaters.
What I would recommend under those, restrictions, what I would recommend is films to be seen.
So, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Rambo.
And no Rambo. Yeah. Now, bootlegging of Western tapes and later discs and now memory sticks has been very common and is still very common in Iranian streets. You can actually see brand new American films in Iran. And it created a whole new job. It was called video men. People with actual briefcases going from home to home and giving people these bootlegged versions. And this is the way that Western trends really came into Iran. And you could see that when Top Gun was actually released. You could see so many Iranian men in the streets with the Tom Cruise haircut, with the Ray-Ban glasses, with the bomber jacket, and actually merchants in the street of Iran would say Top Gun sunglasses here for sale. This was, of course, also dangerous because authorities were very much against it, but this was the latest fashion once Top Gun was released.
There's going to be a new Top Gun coming out.
Exactly, because we are remaking everything.
Why not? And Top Gun as well. Maybe Top Gun 2 will be released in theaters officially in Iran. We'll have to wait and see.
I feel the need,
in the meantime,
for speed.
In the meantime, Iran is suing Hollywood. In 2013, authorities were reportedly planning to sue Hollywood over Oscar-winning movie Argo. As we can remember, they thought this depiction of what happened with the 444 American hostages after the revolution was insulting to Iran. And it's not only Argo. We can see films like 300, which depicts King Leonidas and 300 men fighting the Persians in 480 BC. They say this is insulting insulting footage, and they are determined to file a lawsuit. They were determined. It was all reports from within local media. We still don't know what happened with these lawsuits, but there was a French lawyer who was sent to Iran to talk with the local authorities and try to understand how they can bring upon a lawsuit against Hollywood and these very insulting Iranian films.
I think actually that is the route that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu should take.
Absolutely, they should bankrupt them.
Sue, not only that, via Hollywood. Via Hollywood, and that may be the way.
Sue by proxy.
Into the hearts of Iranians.
Sue by proxy, and we all know who runs Hollywood. Yeah, but that said, that may be the way. It would be fascinating to see, and I think from a cultural point of view, because we've been sitting here and discussing the fact that what the Americans are banking on is the fact that American values, which are transformed via, I'm sorry to say, food and movies, that they're going to infiltrate Iran en masse.
So as we can see, they already have.
Exactly.
It has been decades since we have seen official brands in America, American brands in Iran, but even though these were banned, they were seeping into Iran all the time. Now that sanctions might be lifted and it might be official and maybe even blessed by the authorities, we'll have to wait and see. It could be a booming industry for American companies. It's a huge population, as we said, second largest market in the Middle East.
40 million.
40 million women.
Only just 40 million.
No,
it's
77 million people. And this is a great opportunity, and companies have been waiting for this for a whole long time. We said 2014, Apple was already into conversations with local resellers. We can find iPods and anything, iPhones in Iran today, but it's always through unofficial channels.
Through a third party or bootleg, and I think, sadly, in the time that we have to conclude what was maybe most important, everybody's discussing the dangers, what's behind the deal. Money, a lot of money is involved here that's going to go in and out. Time will tell historically what this deal truly means. This was a special edition looking at that deal signed in Vienna yesterday that is set to reshape the Middle East. Thank you for being with us. Of course, do not forget to check out i24 News Morning Edition on, of course, Facebook, Twitter, all the social networks, and stay with us tomorrow. Tune in for another edition of your Morning Edition to get the news. Thank you.